solve other problems also. And you can say, oh yeah, and that will also help this, and that will also help that. As opposed to problems that result from kind of a more linear process where, okay, you design something, oh, but then that creates this impediment here, so we have to detour around it this way, but then that causes congestion over here, so we're gonna do this. And as if you're, making kind of a series of modifications and adjustments, you have to have if one problem has then has a cascade of problems that has to be fixed, you're on the wrong track. If you have a problem that has a cascade of solutions that it offers that you haven't thought about, you're on the right track.
That's actually very good, and I think it comes down to the questioning. I mean, if you really, going back to this listening well, I think it's just a matter, just as much a factor of asking the right question and how to, phrase that in a way that you get at the answer that can solve multiple problems. I think it's about finding the simplest way to solve. What is it? Simplicity on the far side of complexity. After you work it and work it and work it and work it, then you find, hey, this really has an answer that solves a lot of problems at a very simple level. And it's all about intellectual questioning and really digging in.
An example of that, and I have to share this because this is my current biggest pet peeve at the moment, but I take a train from. This is an example of sort of the wrong cascade of solutions. I take the train, our map office is in Irvine, so I take the train from LA, and I can walk to the office. And it's in Irvine, so it's these office parks and these parking, and they've got landscaping all around it, and that's very nice that there's landscaping. But I think one thing to remember is that pedestrians have intelligence. And an emergent intelligence. So, you sometimes, we work on these plans and we draw these lines on the page and they look very beautiful and things curve very nicely, but you don't realize how people are going to perceive the space on the ground and look for the shortest route. And so my walk from the train station to my office, which is about 10-15 minutes, involves bushwhacking. I basically have to cut through the bushes to get to my office because there's this very significant hedge all the way around, and if I were to not do that, it adds another probably 5 minutes, or maybe another quarter mile to my walk. And there is a war going on between the people who take the train and work in this office complex and have to walk, and the landscapers who are constantly putting in new bushes and signs, and they're putting in, and it's getting bigger and bigger. They're putting like plastic, caution tape, and barriers that we don't walk through, and every day people walk through and take them out and keep walking there. It's so simple. There's an emergent intelligence of pedestrians. They put in some pavers, we would not mess up their grass, and we would be done, and they would save a lot of energy, and we would save energy, and they would be sending the communication that they're supportive of pedestrians. But it's not part of the landscape plan, and so it's not sort of looking at how that environment's actually being used. It's a perfect example. I love I didn't come up with this, I don't know who did, but kind of not putting in hardscape paths initially in an environment and letting the pedestrians walk and see where those paths get worn, and that's where you put your hardscape. I think that's exactly the kind of thing that Orange County could really use to learn is honoring the intelligence of pedestrians.
In Canada, and I guess in northern cities in the U.S., almost all projects start in the spring, and the studies go on in the winter, and they specifically do that for that exact same reason. Instead of the worn-out path, you can easily see where everyone's walking in the snow, right? And my mom's condo has the exact same problem as you have, and I've written letters to the board to say just put some pavers down, and then you don't have to worry. But they don't, because they're trying to. That's why they want it. They're not listening.
And a good model for this, I know people are probably very familiar with Kevin Lynch's work, the whole notion of using the image of the city, paths, edges, district nodes, and landmarks, and how to organize those areas to really create linkages and connections and pedestrian-friendly environments. I think he really kind of coined the term wayfinding in the 50s, and I think that is a great analogy for how to kind of create these pedestrian-friendly environments. It's a great model and tool to use as you develop these streets.
Yeah, I actually think that's a great point to build on, in the sense that the idea, the phrase of pedestrian intelligence is a pretty powerful one. In terms of how do you translate that to real design, like not this real design, is design with capital D. I don't know how many of you know the Student Center at the IIT in Chicago was basically a building that Rem Koolhaas did, where it was designed on over top of the legacy of Mies van der Rohe, where there was this black pavilion on a paved campus, and what he basically decided to do was literally track how the students go back and forth from different buildings, and then literally just build a shell around the pedestrian path, so that the pedestrian path goes through the building, and they become the kind of corridors for the building itself. So I think the reason why I raise them as an example is that there are design out there that are actually really trying to take advantage of this kind of connectivity. And a couple of those examples, the idea of how do you connect one side of the street to another? That means what that suggests is how do you create hotspots from one side of the street to another, where the mall entrances are, where the kind of dense retails or hotspots could be. Those things are all suggestive of how you plan for a pedestrian-oriented community. So I think, like in the case of Rem Koolhaas and the IIT, they actually turned that into a kind of signature of how they're going to approach design in the future. So they're using these kind of inherent intelligence and translated it into a kind of bigger kind of branding experience for the institution in itself. And I think that leads to a really interesting point, because I know that Disneyland is really close by one of these neighborhoods, and I think there's this idea of how do you introduce externality into community design. We talked about if you have one roundabout that's really well done, they have to consider how they will look if another one is not so well done. There's a kind of externality that you start to establish as a system. So the idea is, if you have Disneyland close by, that's an attraction. People understand that as a place, as a destination. But how do you start to figure out what Laguna Hill or Garden Grove is with respect to that? How do you leverage that proximity into this particular setting? How do you draw those relationships? Or how do you even have Laguna Hills and Garden Grove? Like, how do you draw those relationships so that they have a kind of character with respect to each other?
That's an excellent question. Well, I think you again look at the people and how you can attract those different audiences from the different groups. Again, you have a lot of families going to Anaheim and going to Disneyland and all that. Again, we could create more family-friendly environments. Again, we're in that position. If you look at the conditions right now, again, it's a huge sea of parking around the Laguna Hills Mall, and we're trying to create these linkages. How can you create a space that's much more friendly for the mom to take her kids from her car to the mall? Doesn't have to go, cross so many, all these vehicular pathways are basically turned into edges that make it fairly, imposing to cross. And since the car is such a dominant factor of our culture right now, again, putting these parking structures, I think, are a brilliant idea to kind of like isolate the car, have them park once, and then create more closer proximity that families, people can really enjoy and spend the time connecting to their environment in a variety of different ways. So that would be just one scenario.
And I think related to that point, for me, I just lost my train of thought. What was I thinking? You triggered something really I thought was profound, but I totally lost it. I guess it's not profound enough.
I have a question, actually.
Yeah.
Just to kind of bring it back, I'm kind of sensing bubbles in the audience. I'm going to play pretend for a second. So I'm a developer, and I've got to hurry up and jump on a deal and make sure that everything goes into place. This all sounds great and wonderful, but how do I become a good host to allow these ideas to evolve and still still capture, a physical market that's inclusive of users, but at the same time, I don't really have the time to spend going through this exercise. What can I do?
It's really, again, identifying, to be a successful developer, I think to really make something vital, is you have to identify the needs. I mean, what do people really need in this environment that could be prosperous? If you just want to, again, I think the answers are detected rather than invented on this. Putting another big retail box in that environment won't work. I mean, a developer wants to come in and put more retail, I mean, they're going to struggle. So how can we, if creative problem solving, find the answers from within? What's the community need? Who's the audience? How can we appeal to them in a way that could really enrich the experience? And again, have that in a cohesive way that, right now, I think there are so many walls and boundaries with every different development in this area. How do you create tear down a little bit of those boundaries and make it more unified in a way that creates a holistic experience?
Yeah, I think I would challenge some of the assumptions in what you're saying. That notion of we've got to make a deal right now and we don't have time for this exercise, I've got to just put something there, is how we got into this situation to begin with. Where development went in and it was simple. Okay, it's a big box. We understand big box. The economic model is really easy. The number of landowners are few. We've got our formula. Go. Now we're stuck with it because we didn't build in the flexibility. We didn't build in the connections. I really think that an integrative design process that focuses on sustainable design does take a little bit more time, but it's not so much how much time, it's how you use the time that you do have. So a really good integrative charrette at the beginning is a good facilitator to put all the ideas on the table and encourage cross collaboration between disciplines. So you don't have your civil engineer over here and your landscape architect over here and your planners over there and your developers crunching numbers and doing all these other things and working with the city, and nobody's talking to each other. So you end up with this simplified set of overlapping systems rather than a set of meaningful integration. And by bringing that together and looking at the actual planning and development process and bringing that integration in, building it into your schedule, building it into your budget. Some things cost more money, but some things really don't. Good design shouldn't be more expensive per se. It's configuring the land uses and things like that. That's not. It's not an all or none proposition. I really think in these particular situations, you're going to have a much more economically viable and successful community if you take some time up front and listen, think about what are the mixes of housing types. You probably want some affordable housing in here so you can bring in federal dollars and bring that to the table, but then that brings in another user group that you have to understand what are their needs and think that through. But the more you can do that in an integrative way, the more you end up with emergent solutions that are flexible over time and successful and meet your financial needs as well as other needs. And I think that the consumer is becoming more sophisticated and looking for that. And the market's changing. So right now, maybe there's not a lot of consumers buying, a lot of development. Development's still pretty stalled overall. But the demand for grain and the understanding of grain is, people are becoming ever more sophisticated in